right, welcome back to another episode of the Simply ICS Cyber. I'm Don C. Weber. I'm here, the cybersecurity guy, and I'm here with Thomas Van Norman.
Hi, everyone. It's Tom Van Norman. Today we have Jim Gilsinn to talk to us about 62443. It's a pretty well-known standard within the ICS/OT world. But we have somebody here that's helped write the standard and is an expert on it. So, Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So,
what can you tell us about 62443? Well, Don.
Yeah. Well, actually, Jim, why don't we get started with introduce yourself, please. Let everybody know where you're coming from and how you got involved in 62443.
Sure. So I'm a longtime standards guy. I started my career at NIST in the engineering lab, doing like automated machining, automated vehicles, things like that. Stumbled into cybersecurity and ICS networking back in 2000. And then in 2002, the ISA Standards Committee, ISA 99, was getting started. And they asked me to basically sit on that committee and start working on it to help develop ICS cybersecurity. So I've been a member of the ISA 99 committee since 2002. So going on 13, 14, something like that years, because it actually had gotten kicked off in 2001. So September, the meeting was actually September 11th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, and then the committee got started basically a year later.
So Jim, you've actually been doing this standard individually for as long as I've been logging into computers. I mean, that's when I actually first picked up a computer is in 99, wow. Early 2000. So, wow.
Yep. So, and then in 2000, I basically started working on the committee and signed up to be the co-chair of the committee developing the asset owner standard. So all the requirements for asset owners, probably mid 2000s. And since then, I've been working on basically the 2.1 standard. And we'll talk a little bit more about the organization, but basically it's 2.1 is one of the standards in the series that concentrates on asset owner requirements and the security program and things like that. So I helped develop that. We published the original version in 2009, 2010. And then in 2012, I basically signed up to be the co-chair of the committee. So I was co-chair of the entire ISA 99 committee for 10 years till 2022, when I stepped down to just things were going on in my work world and lots of stuff was taken over. So I felt it was better to step down and give someone else the responsibility. So, but I'm still active in the committee. I've been active pretty much since the beginning. And then this past year, we released the updated version, probably about a month ago in ISA and the end of last year in IEC for the asset owners. So, but I've been involved in a bunch of the other different standards in the series as well. Around 2012, I also left NIST and became a consultant for probably a dozen years. First of all, at a small consulting firm named Connexus that did safety and security. And then I left there and went to Dragos for 5 years. And now for the last few months, I joined MITRE. So I'm now an ICS cybersecurity engineer at MITRE. My big project there is helping out rural and municipal utilities. So. Cool. So
yeah, Jim, I like it. Hey, so and Tom was talking about this before we started, but we hear about ISA 95, which helped define some of the how we're going to organize, our industrial areas. And we hear people talking about ISA 99, which is supposed to be the cybersecurity. So what's the relationships between 62443 and 99? I mean, what's that whole thing?
Sure. Any standards committee or any standards organization has multiple committees doing multiple things all at once. And so within ISA, which is a US-based ANSI standard organization, there's like ISA 88 that does safety, and there's ISA 95, which does like enterprise security. And then there's ISA 99 that does cybersecurity for industrial systems. And early on, ISA decided that they wanted to have one major committee doing all of the cybersecurity across all of the sort of industrial environments, instead of trying to like embed security within each individual standard. So ISA 99 was born back in 2002. And then originally the standards were ANSI ISA 99 dot such and such. And then in 2009, 2010, what happened was IEC, which is one of the international organizations that does standards, basically decided that instead of trying to write their own, they would work with ISA 99 and publish the standards internationally. And so the 62443 series numbering basically was born at that point. And they have their own like working group numbers and everything like that. And their working group numbers don't relate directly to 62443 either. But both sides are working on different parts of the 62443 series cooperatively. And so we've actually, for the last few years, we've been developing joint teams, and we've been working on the standards combined. And so there's, we'll get into it, but there's a how the sausage is being made kind of effort where it comes to like joint voting and commenting periods and everything like that. But there is no technical difference between a standard that is produced and published as ISA like ISA 62443 and IEC 62443. They are the same technical documents. They have some different boilerplate in front of them. So one has like IEC boilerplate, one has ANSI ISA boilerplate. But effectively, if you look at the requirements, if you look at all the definitions, everything within the document that is technical, those should be word for word the same.
A lot of stuff there, Jim. It's a lot of people who've been working in here or working in the field for a long time still refer to it as a ISA 99, but 62443 is certainly a common standard for everybody. So Jim, the one thing that ISA 99 or 62443 is probably most popular known in the controls world is zone and conduits. What are zone and conduits? We get people that say their network diagram. We get people to say their data flows. What's the purpose of them?
So if you actually look at the definition of a zone, it is a set of security requirements that contain a bunch of assets. So, but the way most people think of it as is basically being converted into sort of subnets and groupings of assets that way. So in standardese, it's technically just a set of requirements, but when you actually like translate it into real world, it basically usually tends to be realized in terms of like subnets and network architecture that way. So it's a way that you can basically combine a series of assets together and provide protections around them that you can basically establish that you can kind of limit the communications in and out of those. And the conduit definition is in the process of being changed. The old definition talked a lot more about communication pathways and things like that. It is being converted over to talk about data flows, which is the way that most people actually like use the concept of conduits. So we're changing over from standardese kind of language into something that's more realistic to how people actually like talk about conduits. And so it's going to be data flows going between sets of devices, data flows between security subnets or zones or anything like that. So.
But do people actually use zones and conduits out there when they're deploying these and talking about cybersecurity program? Is it just a cybersecurity program thing, or is it an actual thing that's used out in the field?
Oh, it's zones especially is used, and people will talk about their DMZ zone or their DCS zone or their safety zone or things like that. So the term zone has actually kind of made its way into just normal vernacular that people use when they're talking about their different subnets. And conduits, not as much. They're going to talk more about data flows, or they're going to talk about their network connections here and there, or their POTS, or their SCADA, or their VPN, or things like that. But the zones definitely has.
Yeah. So whenever I'm talking about the enforcement boundaries, so where we put countermeasures like firewalls, data diodes, and stuff like that, we actually they've actually changed the term around. It's like a security connection point, I think now. Is that how?
Yeah. Yeah, we were trying to use the term like boundary device or things like that, because we were trying to be technology agnostic. And since we started this back in 2002, the technologies have changed so much since then. And we'll probably mention it, but standards take a long time to write, and they are usually behind the scene. It's like behind the times, especially international standards. So it's the kind of thing that you have to use generic enough terms that the technology can change out from under you. So whether it's a data diode or a firewall or an IDS or IPS system, or like a stateful firewall, or a stateful like a stateless firewall, or like a next gen, or whatever you want to call it. We don't care about the technology. What we're trying to do is basically have some device between your systems that can restrict the traffic based on some sort of knowledge, whether it's rule-based, whether it's some sort of like anomaly detection or something like that. We don't care. We're trying to restrict the traffic. We're trying to say that you're limiting things to a certain number of pinch points where you can tightly control things. And so it's more about the ideas of controlling that traffic versus the specific technology.
Jim, so the standards are not written for any one vertical.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this standard fit in? Or I'm sorry, where does the standard work the best out of all the different verticals that use it?
I will say that it is probably a lot more of the users that have been involved in the standard have come from chemical and petrochem and oil and gas. Just naturally, they have wanted to have a more international set of like documents that they can go to the Middle East or South Asia or the US or South America or Canada or whatever. They've wanted to have a more consistent set of documents that they can use across the globe. And those organizations tend to be global to begin with. So they have concentrated more on international standards than things like the electric industry, which is more regulated. And so they tend to look towards the local regulations more than they do towards generic international standards. Now, we've actually found that there are all sorts of industries making use of the standard that we didn't think about to begin with. We found like medical devices and building automation systems, transportation systems. Yeah, there's a lot of different organizations we found that are using it that we didn't think about. But a lot of the users tend to come from the sort of chemical and petrochem and oil and gas industry. But we've had a lot that come from manufacturing. We've had drugs manufacturing involved in it. We've had utilities, of course, and a bunch of other things too. So,
Jim, when you talk about those companies and stuff like that, it seems like the larger companies that will have a more comprehensive cybersecurity program, vulnerability management program. I can see them doing that. In other words, organizing that risk management around that, needing that cybersecurity program. But how does this? How would a smaller organization apply this, especially when they don't have a lot of people? Maybe they have a team of 4 or less, and it seems it seems huge to do everything in the 62443. So what are your thoughts around that?
We have tried to do our best to account for different size organizations. So like the way that we have written the new 2.1 standard for asset owners is basically you should have a policy or policies and procedures around this thing. We don't say exactly what has to go into that, but you have to have some policy and procedure around it. And not just that, but the way we're going to measure it is on a maturity scale. So we're not going to say thou shalt do it and it's a compliance requirement and you're going to get like a $10,000 fine or whatever if you don't have it. It's that here is this requirement that you have to have a policy and procedure, and it could be something that your smart people know that they're supposed to do. So you may get like a maturity level 1 because you got smart people, or it was written on a napkin in somebody's desk drawer and they kind of know they're supposed to do these things, all the way up to organizations that have like full-on security programs and KPIs and OKRs and like all these kinds of like ways to measure their metrics. Objectives and key resources is that's one of the new terms that I've seen talked about. But yeah,
I'm gonna have to look that up. I'll have to remember that one.
Yep, it's the new KPIs. No one likes to talk about KPIs anymore. So, but yeah, so they basically they may go all the way from having that back of the napkin thing, or Joe Bob that's been there for 30 years and knows he's supposed to do these things every week to like check on stuff. All the way up to full-on security programs with feedback mechanisms and yearly reviews and audits and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I did because I just read the 2-1. Well, I read it. It's like scroll. But at the same time, I did see how the new version pulled out a lot of redundant verbiage from that was outlined in the 2-3, or excuse me, 3-2, around the risk management program, really getting back to what you're talking about, some of the more important things to identify within a security program. And I've been going off on a kick on, keep people away from our ICS mediums. That's the first thing I noticed in there was the verbiage around identifying that physical access to these environments, and making sure and reviewing that, and then also the data flow. How do we do remote access, and how does data exchange? So that was a unique improvement. How did that happen?
Well, so you got to remember the history here. So 2.1 originally so when we originally put things out, there was a document 1.1, which is basically just concepts and terminology. That was produced in 2007. And then 2.1 came about in 2009, 2010. And that was the first standard that we had in place in the series that actually laid any kinds of requirements on any of the organizations, asset owners, like product suppliers, anybody. And so we basically took somebody offered up, one of our asset owners actually offered up their security program for us to basically take a look at and see how they did things. And we kind of modeled some of what we had on that. And we originally had a full cybersecurity program from soup to nuts, like every bit of it, including like integration with IT and everything. And when we produced that at the time, IEC said, we'll publish this, but you have to then rewrite it as sort of like the above and beyond the existing IT program for just what's sort of like included in your ICS cybersecurity program. And so one of the reasons why it took so long to now produce the second version, I mean, we're talking 13, 14 years between editions. We actually scrapped it and rewrote it 2 full times. And so this is the third generation of literally rewriting the document from scratch. We started over. We literally rewrote every single requirement, every single page in the document twice before we came up with this version. So, and some of that we started with 27,000 and tried to like make a modification to 27,000. Which, if you don't know, ISO IEC 27000 is the IT standard for cybersecurity that's international. And so a lot of companies in the US, they look at NIST or things like that, but internationally, everyone uses 27,000. And so we started out saying, okay, let's try and use 27,000. We tried that, and basically we had people basically say, we will never, ever use this document. Some of our more influential asset owners, they basically looked at that and said, we will never use this. We will actually like actively work against you if you try and publish this. So we were like, okay, we can't logically go and put this out. So we said, okay, let's start over. And so we scrapped everything we had there and started over. And eventually it came to what we've got now, which we think is pretty good. We know there's some things that we need to change. And so my working group's actually in the process of like already starting on edition 3 now. So yeah, we know there's some improvements that have to be made. And because it took us so long to get here, there's been a lot of change in the standard series since then. So we know that some of the new technology, like some of the new things, like the risk assessment document and the like integrator document, and there's a bunch of different documents that we now need to start like doing a better job of working with in the series. I didn't really talk about it, but the series is 13 or 14 different documents. So it is if you want to print it out, it's like a good inch or two thick, like a couple inches thick. And it's not cheap either. Yeah,
the cheapest way to get the standard is to become a member and get that view only on the PDF.
Yeah. But yeah. So we have gone through the process of like rewriting it, and that's some of the sausage being made kind of things of like how you actually do standards, that we have turned things into a little bit of a longer process because we are working with IEC, but in the end, we get a standard that is more internationally acceptable. And I know there's people out there that say it takes too long to make standards and, oh, you should just be like putting things out all the time. But there's a reason why, and standards are never going to be, like international standards are never going to be bleeding edge. They're always going to be followers, because you don't want someone coming up with some new way of doing something that completely changes the way you've got to think about it, and have to then go back and re-vote on things. I mean, some of these standards, it can take 9 months to a year for the official voting process to happen, because it has to go out to international. It has to be translated into multiple languages and all of that kind of stuff too. So.
Hey, Tom,
A lot of stuff. Yeah. What do we miss? We missed a lot, but unfortunately, in 30 minutes, we covered a lot. Jim, the most people, I don't think, realize how many different standards there are underneath 62443.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee that if you're listening to this podcast, your job touches one of them. It's just a very large standard.
Yeah.
So I know I'm grateful and thankful that you came on here and shed some light on all the standards. And Don and I we use 62443 all the time for many years, but I highly recommend somebody going out to the ISA website, just pulling up the other standards, looking at them, seeing where they relate to the job that you currently do or a job that you want to do in the future.
Yeah, and as the cybersecurity guy, I can guarantee that I am better at how I talk about this. My conversations with the ICS guys, out in the field, whether it's using terms like zones and conduits, but also talking about the concepts of data flow and so forth. I'm much better at the way I approach that, and definitely in my by using those terms, I think it helps them understand that I have done some research. I have looked into it, and I'm trying to be on the same sheet of music as they are.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, what's your experience from that standpoint about the certifications?
So ISA does provide a certification related to the 62443 series. The training department works with the standards committee, but it's a separate entity. So sometimes there's some mismatch, but generally they do try and work with us to make sure that they're consistent. And they also work in a lot more of the practical way to use ICS security. So I know there's some labs and things like that have. They don't really directly relate to the standard series, but they do relate to a lot of the concepts of doing the work of actually building out systems and testing systems related to ICS security. So they are good. I think the first in the series concentrates a lot more on the standard series itself, and then it gets more increasingly into the technology of just general ICS cybersecurity stuff as it goes along. I think there's 4 courses in total. I went through them a long time ago before they when they were first getting started and kicked off. So
yeah, I mean, at least at least it forces you to read, and taking the test. There's a bit of it's a memorization test. It's not an open book or anything like that.
Yep.
So Jim, before we leave, are there any we've got another minute. Are there any last minute thoughts?
If you were at all interested, as you said, Don, being a member of ISA, you get at least view-only access to the standards. But we also highly encourage people to get involved. And getting involved in the standard does not mean that you have to actually be one of the people writing. You could just be involved and read and comment on the standards as they come out. Generally, we encourage everyone to potentially provide comments. Comments are open to anyone, regardless of whether you're an ISA member or an IEC member or anything like that. We encourage everyone because we're looking to get that sort of broad aspect and what did we miss? Because we don't know everything, and there's always some things we're going to miss. And so the more diverse group of people and industries and everything like that, geographic regions we get, the better. So
awesome. Thanks. Any last minute thoughts, Tom?
I do not have any.
Awesome. It's 624 for 3. No thoughts. Hey, Jim, we really appreciate you coming on board and last minute and kind of helping us with this. Simply ICS cyber effort. And yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, everybody have a great day.
Bye.